So essentially, like what I see burnout and anxiety and like people coming to my office with trauma is a result of us pushing away all those emotions for so many years as a result of us sensitive people and just human, messy people putting all of that aside and then it inevitably having to come back up at some point.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Multiple Truths podcast. I am one of your hosts, Holly, and today I'm joined with Shana Frank. She's a licensed therapist and really supports people struggling with anxiety and perfectionism, which I love because I know I've really struggled with those things in the past too. I feel like so many of us do. So to have an open, honest conversation around it, I feel like is going to be really supportive for men and women, because I know Shana primarily works with women right now, but has worked with men in the past. So we'll kind of touch on all of that. But I met Shana at a wedding we both attended in Puerto Rico a little over 2 years ago. It was like one of her husband's friends' weddings, but I had never met you or before.
I hadn't met anybody. I was like, this is also brand new.
Yes, but I like immediately saw your light. Like immediately, you have such a bright light about you, like you radiate. And even seeing like your social media, Instagram, because I know you're a therapist and you get your clients, you have social media, all of that. And your passion for this work really radiates through what you put out. I can see that you're so passionate about it and so vulnerable and authentic when it comes to it. So I'm just so excited to have her on today. So welcome, Shana. I'm excited to chat with you.
Holly, I feel the same way about you, truly. Like, I cannot tell you how many times after I met you and Eric, like, I was like, I just feel like you meet those people in your life. And for whatever reason, you resonate. I think I was having coffee at like one of those little cafes one morning and Eric popped in and I was like, I just love you and Holly. I don't know what it is. And Ernie had mentioned, I think you'll meet Holly and I think you guys will have so much in common. And it was so true. And I think it's really beautiful that we both remember that feeling even from so long ago. It says so much.
Yes, it really does. Because it's almost been 2 years ago. But immediately when I was thinking of people to have on the podcast, I'm like, Shana, yes. Because I just felt you and like your love that you put into your work. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Likewise, I'm so excited.
Yes. So if you want to just share a bit about yourself and the work that you do, like how you got into this work. Like I said, I know you're a therapist that help men, women struggling with anxiety, perfectionism. So if you want to expand on that a bit, I'd love to hear.
Yes. Okay. So I don't ever have a beautiful scripted story for this. I think a lot of therapists do. And I find myself being like, okay, like how do I make this sound beautiful? But it's not. I don't think my journey was linear or straight to get to this point. But I will say that I always knew I was deeply sensitive and emotional. And I'm one of 6 kids. And so I think I found my place in that family dynamic of being the dramatic one, being the one that, like, now looking back, I think I was just trying to get attention in any way that I could in a big family. And I took a psych class in high school and I love her. Her name is Miss Martinez. And I just fell in love with it. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I don't know anybody who's been a therapist. You know, back then, they weren't as popular. They weren't as talked about then, right? Like, I think we knew about psychology and psychiatrists, but just like general psychotherapy, there's been a big boom now. But back then, when I was like 17, I was like, okay, I'm just going to roll with this. I'm going to trust what I feel. I know people think I'm crazy for this. And then even in college, when I decided to major in psychology, I had so many people say, you know, like, how are you going to make money doing that? Like, are you sure you're going to have to do all this? You're going to have to go to school forever. Like, you want to be a shrink, like all that stuff. But no matter what, I just kept coming back to the feeling that whatever work I do has to be connected to this sensitivity because I can't ignore it. It's never been something that I could just put on a shelf. So long story short, I went to grad school and fell in love with it. I fell in love with like the marketing part of it too, which got me into social media. And through my own therapy work, through like the last 8 years, I've really developed this tendency to gravitate towards other people with big feelings that are highly sensitive, that are very empathic. that feel deeply. They're moved by things in life. And I found that a lot of those people, unfortunately, also struggle with anxiety and burnout, right? Because when we feel so much, we want to do so much and we want to help so much. And I think that's kind of just led me to where I am now and like just attracting people, kind of like you and I felt attracted to one another just in the energy.
Yeah. Very sensitive as well. Very
Yeah.
emotional. Yeah.
I think we can pick up on that in other people. And it's like 20 to 30% of the population actually have the innate trait of a highly sensitive person, but I don't think they know that. So they just walk around life saying, like, I'm just too emotional. I'm just too dramatic. I need to learn how to cut these emotions off. So it's always really liberating to see a client of mine realize, okay, I'm a highly sensitive person and it's a trait that I didn't decide to have. And I love helping people learn how to exist with that versus like trying to shove it away, truly.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you said that too, of 20 to 30% of people are, because I know even for me, I shut that part off of me for so long because I grew up and I was told I was too sensitive, too emotional. So I'm like, oh, okay, I need to completely shut that part off of me to feel safe, to be worthy of love, you know? So I've just through my healing journey reconnected to that emotion, that like sensitivity. And it's so beautiful to be emotional and sensitive because when you accept that, you can really see others and their pain and feel what they're going through. It's like such a beautiful trait to have.
I guess he chills. Yes, that's so it. You can just see it. It's beautiful to witness it, truly.
Yes, I love that. For me, I really feel like we're in a mental health crisis. Like I'm going into different companies around San Francisco and online to support people and how they can support their mental health using holistic healing modalities like meditation, breath work, adding in whole foods, movement, that kind of stuff. But as a therapist, I want to get your perspective on this because for me, like I can feel it. I see it. People are disconnected from themselves now than we've ever been. And I feel like rates of burnout, anxiety, depression, PTSD are at record levels. So I'm just curious if that's what you're feeling and seeing too within the work that you do.
Yes, of course, especially since COVID. I don't know what happened during COVID. It's like we all went into this bubble and then came out and we're expected to just live life as if that never happened. Right. So I know anxiety and burnout and all those things have always been present, but now more than ever, especially us millennials that were raised in the age of like our parents who are like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that like hadn't been exposed to all this mental health stuff. Like I think all of us are now in the workforce, all of us millennials, all of us burnt out women and men, and we don't know what to do with it, right? Like we know that that's happening, but what I notice is so many people can come to me and they're like, okay, this is what I'm experiencing, but I have no idea where to start. And it makes me so happy though, too, that even though they're in their 30s or 40s, right? It's still not too late. And they have that awareness. And I think that's all it takes to then be able to open yourself up to what can help. So I think COVID did a lot of this, but I also think what we're seeing now is a lot of us sensitive women and men that are now like being forced to look at those emotions that we put aside for so long because we thought they were wrong, right? Those don't ever just go away. Like you were saying, like you felt like you had to shut them off and turn them off. Those don't go away, but they come back later in life as trauma, as inflammation in the body. So essentially, like what I see burnout and anxiety and like people coming to my office with trauma is a result of us pushing away all those emotions for so many years, as a result of us sensitive people and just human, messy people putting all of that aside and then it inevitably having to come back up at some point. That's the thing with any emotional trauma, anything that occurs to us in life. If we don't deal with it, we might be able to delay it, but it's gonna come up, right? It's gonna come back out, whether or not we want to witness or acknowledge it.
Yeah. And I'm just so happy too. I feel like it's being talked about now more than ever. The tools are out there now more than ever. Therapy is being talked about now more than ever. Like people are really seeing it's safe to get the support you need. It's actually possible to feel good, but so many people, we don't feel good right now. So what can we do to start liberating ourselves, to come back home to ourselves, to our heart, to feel it's safe to feel emotions. We're human. We're meant to feel our emotions, but I feel like so many of us, our parents didn't know how to feel their emotions because their parents didn't know how to help them feel their emotions. So it's been passed down of like, it's not safe to feel emotions. but it is. And we need to learn how to do that in safe containers and release things from our body, because the stored trauma that gets stuck in the body, you have to feel it in order to heal it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why like I love that there's so much out there now, Holly, like in
Yeah.
social media and all that stuff. But I think so often what's missed in some of this online pop psychology is that we can't talk ourselves out of feeling, right? No amount of that cognitive, positive self talk is going to release that stored trauma, right? And not just our stored trauma, but like you were saying, there's actually so much research that says we're actually carrying the DNA and the stress of our moms and our grandmas and their moms, right? So like we're not just trying to release that from our body, but it's all of that other stuff too. So we can't just toxically, positively talk ourselves out of it anymore. It doesn't work.
Yes. It's so interesting. There was this woman, Sahara Rose, who offered an embodiment course to become a certified embodiment coach. So I went through that program because I've learned so much about how trauma gets stuck in the body and helping people actually reconnect with their bodies instead of thinking their way through it. It's like when you're feeling anxious or stressed, it's like, okay, where are you feeling that in your body? Where are you holding that tension in your body? Can we bring awareness to that? What shape, what color does that have for you right now? What's living in your body right now? And really feeling that instead of talking your way out of it, and actually being able to like see where it is in your body and then express it, like yell, scream, cry, like physically release it. Because so many things of what I'm learning is you cannot talk your way out of trauma. You can't talk your way out of a feeling. It has to be felt. So helping people get back in their body. But I think too, the awareness of that is huge. And the work that you do of helping people like get to the awareness of where this is stemming from and all of that is so needed. All of it is so needed. It's so connected.
Yeah, like what you were saying, like being able to name it to tame it. That's half of the work that people come to therapy for, is just like naming it and acknowledging it and allowing it to be there for the first time in their lives. Right. And then the other half is, okay, what do we do with that? Right. So there's half of it is awareness and insight. And the other half is like, okay, now that we know that that's what's going on, how do we heal from it? And how do we also learn to live with the parts of us that like aren't ever going to go away? And that's okay. Right. Like, I don't think we can ever be 100% healed, Holly. Like, I don't know what you think about that,
No,
but
it's a forever journey. It's like what I feel is it's integrating all parts of you, your shadow parts, the part that is that you do have to swim around, the, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, loving it all, because welcoming it all, accepting it all for what it is, because we all have light and dark within us. It's accepting it and just being a good, coming from your heart space, you know, feeling your way through life, but accepting that you're still we're human, you know, we're here to have this human experience. We're always going to have negative thoughts pop up, but it's having the tools and the awareness to be like, oh, I see why this is coming up. And let me just shift this a bit, you know?
Oh my gosh, it's so telling that you've done so much of your own work, truly. Like I can talk about it, right? Like these parts of us, and there's like a school of therapy called IFS, internal family systems.
I love IFS. Yeah.
So beautiful. And I just think it's so much better than any of these like schools of therapy that tell us to just talk ourselves out of these parts. Like these parts of us are there for a reason. Like that comes up a lot with people who have like an eating disorder, for example. That part of them came up to protect them from whatever it was that they were feeling, right? And like if they could just control that aspect of their lives, and like maybe they could feel safe. And the issue is like, I just listened to a podcast with Glennon Doyle. She was talking to the creator of IFS and he was walking her through it. And do you know who Glennon? You probably know who she is, right?
I have not heard of her. I'll have to look into her though.
Oh my gosh, she's great. Anyways, like the creator of IFS, the therapy, was saying like that's the issue. So many of us try to not look at those parts of ourselves and just expect them to disappear. But they're all always going to come back up, right? Absolutely. Like it's about how do we like change our relationship with those parts of ourselves, right? Like Inside Out. Have you seen that movie? It's so cute.
I've heard it. I've heard about it. But yes, I exactly know what you mean. Yes, because truly for me, what has helped me get to this place that I am is inner child work. Because I did struggle with an eating disorder. I did struggle with anxiety and this need to be perfect. And it manifested itself as an eating disorder within me. But I've been able to go back to these younger parts of me and love them and accept them and see them. Like all of us just want to be seen, heard, loved, and accepted. And so I've been able to go back and do that for these younger parts of me and be led to past memories and be able to be that nurturing, mother loving energy to these younger parts of me. And that has been the most profound healing that I've experienced. And so that's why I'm so passionate about IFS, inner child work, inner teenage work, connecting with your higher self. It's so powerful. It's so powerful, especially with anxiety and like perfectionism too.
Mhm. What have you noticed, like Holly, like when you've gone back to these parts of you, like what have you noticed it is that they've needed to hear or feel in order to not have to take up so much space?
Yeah. So one incident that really sticks out to me when I went back and was like with this younger part was this fear of me putting myself out there and really feeling my way through life, speaking my truth, speaking out. And this deep seated fear, this younger part of me, when I went back, it's like, but what if we get made fun of? What if people don't like us? What if people think we're stupid? It's like, it's so much of that fear of what other people are going to think, this fear of rejection. And so when I really heard her, I gave her space to say what she needed to say of that, what if people don't like us? What if we get made fun of? What if we aren't successful? What if we do sound stupid? It's like, honey, I've got you. I love you. I see you. I know that you know what you're talking about. I accept you for who you are. And you are safe. You're safe. It's safe for you to speak your truth. You are enough just as you are. And so it's like really showing her that nurturing, loving energy. That's all she needed to hear of, I see you. I love you. I've got you. You're safe. We've got this. And anytime too, it's like that memory has stuck out to me so much because anytime I get tripped up about, speaking on social media or doing a speaking event or something, that younger part of me, she's gotten much softer, but she still comes up. And it's like, I just need to sit there, breathe, and see her.
Yes. Tell her, like, I see you. Yes. And you know what? Like, I think what so many people miss when they're talking to their inner self and like these inner child parts, they're not talking in this like soothing voice that I just heard you say, which is like so much of it, right? Our nervous system will not react well to a voice that feels demeaning or critical, right? Like half of it is having to speak to ourselves in this kind, gentle, nurturing voice. And I just felt that from you. Like I could really feel like you were talking to a child. And that's something that I think people miss is that part.
I know. And I feel like too, there's something with what I'm really realizing is so many people have mother wounds. And so they were never nurtured in that nurturing, mother loving way. So if they were never nurtured in that way, how would they know how to speak to themselves in that way? That's really what I'm seeing. It's like people don't know how to nurture themselves because they've never been nurtured in that maternal loving way. My mom is very nurturing, very maternal. And I see so much of her in me when I do that. And I've really cultivated that within myself. But I know so many people haven't, and it's really foreign to speak to themselves in that way,
Absolutely. And that's why like it takes that practice. It takes being willing to get messy and mess it up, right? You're gonna feel silly. You're gonna feel vulnerable. That's what I think you were kind of saying when you're like, every time I have to show up and take space and do something different and let myself be seen and heard, it's gonna feel messy. You're not gonna get it right every time. You're gonna be like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, is this real? Is this helping? And that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong just because it feels hard. It just means it's not familiar, like you said.
Yeah, it can be really uncomfortable. And I know for me, even when I was doing the one memory that I just brought up, when I was really allowing my younger self to take up space, like I allowed myself to cry for 30 minutes, probably more than 30 minutes. Like it was a young cry, a young part of me that really needed to take up space. And I really allowed it with no judgment, doing this stuff with absolutely no judgment for yourself because it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel foreign, but it's so much a part of the work to actually integrate these parts and to feel good. It does work. It really does. If you're like, show yourself love and compassion and no judgment as you're moving through these things.
Yeah. The mindfulness piece of it. Yeah.
And I know for me, I feel really called to even create inner child, inner teenager meditation so people can start to get that nurturing, loving energy, understand what it's like. Because I know it's hard for people to how do I even access these parts of me? How do I even do that? I was guided through a meditative state to these younger parts. So that's what I do for my clients. That's what I do for other people, what I feel called to do more of, because it's so healing. Have you heard of Dr. Kennedy before? He's a neuroscientist.
No, I don't think so. I'm so surprised we're like bringing up these people. I feel like we would have. I don't know who that is.
Yeah, I'll have to send you his work.
Yeah.
Dr. Kennedy.
I'm writing it down.
He's a neuroscientist and he goes into the power of inner child work because he's healed his anxiety. He's like the RX MD. He's healed his anxiety from inner child work through meeting these younger parts of yourself. Yes. And he's a neuroscientist talking about this.
He's in the brain too, right? That's the thing. Oh my gosh. Okay. So speaking of men, the amount of men that I've worked with, and I'm like, start to bring up these things that you and I are talking about, right? Self-compassion and self-kindness and these parts. Oh my gosh, the reactions I receive and the looks, I can just tell every time. And so like, I think if we can bring in the neuroscience of it, it is science backed, right? Like self-compassion isn't just this pretty thing that us therapists like to use, right? Like it's not this woo-woo jargon. There's actually so much neuroscience and research that shows what happens in our brain when we can talk to ourselves in a kind, soothing voice versus if we're criticizing ourselves, right? And there's actually neuroscience to show that if we're criticizing ourselves in these moments, like especially men, right? That's what they do. They go internal. It shuts off the parts of our brain that we need to learn and heal and grow. I think bringing in that part that you were just saying, like the neuroscience and having all of this research behind it really helps the people who are like hesitant.
Oh, inner child work. What does that even mean? But no,
so
it is.
Fair.
Yes. And I get it too. I would think it's a bit, woo-woo crazy too. But
I used to.
Yeah, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so passionate about it because it is truly the most profound work that I've done so far. So I'm like, I know I need to speak about this because it works and it's so powerful. But yeah, definitely. He has a book, Dr. Kennedy. He talks about too, getting back in your body. So it's like whenever you're having anxiety, it's like your alarm system is going off. So stopping, doing some deep breathing to actually signal to your nervous system, okay, I'm safe. I'm not in danger. We're safe here. What's coming up? Identifying where you're feeling that anxiety living in your body. So like for me, a lot of the time it's in my chest. And so I just I'm breathing, putting my awareness on my chest. And I'm like, okay, what part of me needs to be seen right now? What part of me needs to be seen right now? What's coming up for me? Is there a part of me where I feel like I just sounded stupid, or I feel like they're rejecting me, or I'm being made fun of, and just going back and being like, oh, okay, I see you. I got you. I feel you right now. I feel you, but we're safe, and just acknowledging it. And then it dissipates.
It always does, right? That's why we say like name it to tame it. And like you were saying, all of these parts of us, we don't pick. It's part of being a human, right? Like rejection is so painful because back in the day, right? Like when we were cavemen, if we were rejected, right? If our tribe rejected us, that literally meant death, right? Like that literally meant we wouldn't be able to survive. So every time we get that signal of rejection, or every time like we get rejected from a job interview, or like even me, like anytime like I meet a client for the first time and let's say they don't come back, there's a part of me that comes up that feels really, really shameful. I think so. Just being able to say like, this is natural. This is why this is a survival technique that yes, maybe it worked for us back in the day. Maybe this was helpful. It's not so useful anymore. And how can I allow it to be there while also soothing it? Right? Like rejection is the most painful emotion, shame and rejection. If I could pick two that show up the most for my clients with anxiety and perfectionism, it's those.
Yeah, definitely. In my family, I became so aware of the patterns that show up. And it's like this deep-seated fear of rejection that has been going on in my lineage for years. That's why I also talk about, the healing journey, the self-love journey. It's like realizing when you love yourself, when you can really have that self-love and compassion for yourself, you realize nothing is personal. Nothing's personal. So when someone does say a client for you comes to you and they don't come back, it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what's coming up for them. And same for me. If a client comes to me and doesn't want to sign on, it has nothing to do with me. But like that initial reaction is the rejection. But that's when you can sit there and be like, no, I've got you, like it's not about us.
Yeah. And even if it is, right? Because that's the thing too. Sometimes it is about us. Does that mean that we're not worthy? Does that mean because I'm not a good fit for this person, right? Maybe I messed up and said something totally off and I was having a human day, does that mean that I am not still as worthy as I was before this client? No, it just means we're not going to be for everybody. And that's the not taking it personal part, right? Like, that means they're not going to like us. That's okay. Maybe I did mess up. Okay. How can I take that mindful, non-judgmental view of that so that it doesn't turn into this shame spiral? We're going to feel it. It's going to come up. People aren't going to like us. I think like the goal is being able to witness that and then not allow it to continue to spiral and mean something about who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I love that. I think too, that is so powerful too, to understand that as well. Yeah.
Like not being understood, not being liked. That's always going to happen no matter how hard we try, no matter how perfect we are.
Yeah.
Like you could be the most perfect person at leading meditations, Holly, and there's still going to be people that don't like it. And how do we learn how to be okay with that?
Yeah. And something that has come up for me recently is like, I've really had to acknowledge within myself, it's really hard to be misunderstood. And just me saying that to myself and validating that for myself, it's really hard to be misunderstood. And that's just that. And I can accept that, you know? Yeah.
Even if it comes up, I've been working with this one client for years and I adore her. And once we figured out that that was at the core of most of her difficulties in life, we can just let it be there in sessions. Like we're like, okay, there's that part of you. It's coming up. How is this related to this part of you that like is not understood? Like, does that person have to understand you in order for your feelings to make sense?
Yeah.
No. Right? Like you can't expect to be understood by everybody. But if you understand yourself, if you can show up and say like, I got your back, I understand you. And again, those feelings will still be there, but they won't be so strong and you'll be able to move through life still. We're all going to have those feelings. They're just messengers, right? They're not bad things. They're just really important messages.
Yeah. Like awareness and acknowledgement, I feel like is so powerful when it comes to those things too. It's like you said, that's just like acknowledging that that's there. And yeah, for when that came up for me, when I said it's really hard to be misunderstood, validating that it is really hard to be misunderstood, but I understand you. I understand you.
Yes.
And I was able to just, you know, but not pushing that down of like, oh, I'm not even going to think that.
It's like fine. It's about them. They suck, right? Like that's what we initially do. We don't want to feel it.
Yeah. And it's like, but allowing that to be there, it's hard. That's really hard to be, but it's okay. You know,
especially perfectionist, right? Like that is like the core, right? Like if you look at the definition of perfectionism, it's like the fear of being negatively criticized or evaluated.
Yeah.
Right. And so it is. And like, that's also social anxiety. Like, I think those two overlap a lot.
Yeah.
But it is really like this idea that I don't want anybody to think anything poorly about me. So I'm not even going to think about it. Like they're wrong. It's about them. It's not about me. Like I don't have to be X, Y, and Z, which sometimes like is true. And then sometimes I think there is a part that we need to work through. Like, okay, so what if we're messy and imperfect to them? Right? Like, what does that mean? And what do I want to take? What do I not want to take? Not all feedback is useful. Does that make sense? Like, we don't have to take it all. But how can we remain open to see what may be true about what's showing up?
Yes. Keeping an open heart, listening with an open mind of like, is there truth to what they're saying too? And maybe
is that okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Is it okay if I'm not perfect at that? Is it okay if I'm not the best person in this room for this job?
Yes, absolutely.
Because we're not going to be, right? We're going to be average. We live in a society where we think perfect is the norm because of what we see on social media. Like, I wonder for you, I know when you were talking about your eating disorder recovery, like maybe that was like back in like your younger years and stuff, and it probably still comes up, but how much of that is related to perfectionism, do you think, for like just your personal journey?
Yeah, definitely. So much of it. Like I know for me, I definitely struggled with social anxiety too, because of this fear of how I'm coming off. Because what I've really understood is I've been thinking my way through life my whole life. Like I have not been feeling my way through life. So constantly in my head of like, how am I coming off? What do they think of me? What do I look like? So I had a lot of social anxiety that I masked with alcohol, specifically through college. Like drinking a lot to really mask my feelings of this, to like stop worrying so much about what other people think. And definitely like with my eating disorder, I can see now that that was so linked to worrying about what I placed so much of my self-worth on what I looked like. And if I was worthy of love, I based it off of what I looked like. So I read the book, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen. Oh my gosh. It's such a good book. So I highly recommend
Me too. For anybody, like anybody could get so much out of that book.
Oh my gosh. It changed my life. So
What did that do for you? Tell me.
Yeah. So I already knew that this need to be perfect was in me, like was a part of me, but that really helped me see how deeply this need to be perfect because of the fear of rejection was within my family, specifically on my mom's side of the family. And I really see it. And I talked to my mom about her childhood and my mom about my grandma's childhood. And I see it's such this pattern of needing to look a certain way, needing to portray a certain way to be worthy of love. So it's like so deeply rooted. It's going to manifest differently for everyone in my family. But for me, that's what manifested in me was through my eating disorder. So I've been on this healing self-love journey, I call it now, because I didn't know that's what I was on, but I was learning how to love myself through like holistic healing modalities, like even looking at myself in the mirror and saying, I love you, meditation and journaling and breath work and all of that.
Just being curious to your body, like these body parts of you that you feel aren't good enough or unworthy. Like being just open to those, like seeing them for what they are.
We wanted to take a moment to share something special with you. We have been hosting monthly virtual healing seminars. These gatherings are led by us and all about women coming together, supporting each other, and healing in community. All the proceeds we make from these circles go directly to funding this podcast. If you're looking for a meaningful way to support us, we would love to have you join our next virtual healing seminar. Check out the link in the show notes to register now. We truly appreciate your support and love having you as part of our community.
So I had that understanding of that pattern that had been showing up for me, like on a deeper layer level of this need to be perfect, which I feel like so many women struggle with. I'm very open to holistic healing modalities. So there was an opportunity for me to go on an ayahuasca retreat. And I went on an ayahuasca retreat. And I first want to say too, if you don't know what ayahuasca is, it is a plant medicine. And before I get into that, I truly have the utmost respect for these plants. They are sacred. It is ceremonial and it is so powerful. Like when I say I have the utmost respect and honor for these plants, I have the utmost respect and honor for these plants. And there's so much information out there. I think sometimes there's some misconnotations when it comes to plant medicine because it has been abused before and it's very unfortunate. But there is positive research coming out about plant medicine, which I'm so excited about. But like it does need to be in a sacred, safe environment with trained facilitators, with people that have your best interests at heart. Like the environment, the intention behind it matters. It really does. And it's important to do your own research before going into something like that. Like it really is. But for me, so each plant medicine has a spirit and ayahuasca is the mother spirit. So it's like Mother Aya. So she is like very maternal and she gives you exactly what you need. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's hard, she's going to give you exactly what you need that's for your highest good. So it's just interesting. Before going into that, I had just read the book by Mark Wallen, It Didn't Start With You. And I had this deeper layer understanding of this need to be perfect. And during my ayahuasca ceremony, it was 2 nights. The first night, she really helped me see my soul, who I am, like see myself, who I am, how beautiful of a person I am, like how wise I am. I'm an old soul that has come back, you know? Yes. Yeah. So just
I think that's anybody who's sensitive. Somebody has told them that along the way.
Yes, absolutely. We are all old souls, you know, here. Yes. But it was like a felt sense. Like it felt like a very much like a homecoming celebration for me, like very beautiful. And then the second night though was really hard because she was showing me this need to be perfect. And with ayahuasca too, you can get sick because she's trying to help you rid your body of what you no longer need, what is no longer serving you. And so I was getting sick all night and I was asking like, what is this? And she's like, the need to be perfect. And I was not only getting it out of my body for me, I was doing it for my mom. I felt my grandma, my great grandma, like doing this, getting this need to be perfect out of my body for all of us. Cause this has to stop with me. Like it takes one person stopping the cycle and this stops with me. It makes us sick to not just be who we are. It makes us sick to act like we're someone we're not, to constantly be worrying about what people think. Like it's making us sick. So like I literally was sick all night feeling that, like just not being myself. And she was showing me too, like, I've thought my way through life. I need to start feeling my way through life. Even if it's not what societal norms are, follow what feels true for you, and the right people will see you. The right people will hear you. And
oh my
like,
gosh, full chills.
Yeah, like the authenticity, like, yeah, because I think so many of us wear masks in the world too. And it's like really helping me get that out so I can be my full authentic self, speak from my heart and not from my head, and just follow that. So like 1.2, I like had my hands on my belly and my stomach started to growl. And it was like, you see, like your eating disorder was this part of you that just wanted to feel good enough, that just wanted to fit in, that wanted that need to be perfect. So I really understood that on a deeper level. And then just showing me like how powerful and beautiful our bodies really are, because like they're so beautiful and powerful. So yeah, and that really helped me have a deeper understanding and get it out of my body. And I will be forever grateful for that experience.
I'm grateful for you saying all of this, right? For bringing light to it, because I believe in this stuff too. And I'm right there with you. I have a lot of clients who do, like, not under my observation, but they have done their own work with like psilocybin and microdosing. And I think there's so much there, because what you're saying is like, it made you feel safe in your body again, Holly, right? Like for a lot of people with trauma, they don't feel safe in their body. And so that's where the disconnect starts.
Yeah.
That's where we, like, the eating disorder comes in. That's where all these other things come in. And in order to come back and feel connected to our body, we have to feel safe in it.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I like can't get over your story. I'm like, oh my, I need to go do this. I think Eric was telling me like he did that maybe when I met him.
Eric got sober through a psilocybin experience.
Okay, that's right.
So that was like when we met you at, that was like, that was Eric and my first sober trip 2 years ago. 2 years ago. And
I just adore him. I will never forget, like, that morning, like, I think Ernie went out with the guys the night before and got super wasted. And like, I was like, I'm not into this. Like, that is not me. It makes me super anxious. I changed my relationship with alcohol probably like around the time that you did, right? Like just knowing I was doing that to cure my anxiety, to not feel on edge. Yeah. And so I was all like kind of near the same journey as you guys then, just not like all or nothing, right? And I still like have, you know, like an all or nothing. I don't have an all or nothing relationship with alcohol, but I remember going to that coffee shop and reading a book and being like, it's okay, Shana, like be in alignment with your values. Even though Ernie is doing what he's doing, like I can still hold my own values. And I remember Eric came in, like he was probably the only other one awake besides you within like the whole strip of all of us in those hotels, right? And I just remember being like, hey, like I can do this. I don't have to fit into a box just because everybody else is doing it. Like I'm allowed to focus on my healing journey. So like, I just want to say like, I just love you and Eric. And I think about that conversation all the time. That moment.
I love that. I didn't even realize that about you. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I actually think you're touching on something really powerful too, that people do need to hear about with alcohol, because even with alcohol, like Eric did have to cut it out fully and completely, all or nothing, because he has addiction in his family and it was really negatively affecting him.
He's like allergic to it, right? Like I tell people that there are some of us who are allergic to alcohol. Our body is never going to be able to process it like other people can.
Yeah, just really negatively impacts, very negatively impacting his life, our relationship. And through a psilocybin journey, he was able to get to the root of like why he was drinking so much and share what he needed to share. But for me too, I cut out alcohol just because I realized my anxiety was so much worse with drinking, and my body always rejected alcohol. Like I would have a glass of wine and be hungover the next day. I'm like, my body would tell me like, this is not good for you. Like you're anxious all the time. What it did, I'm so grateful for alcohol because it did support me in social settings, like growing up. So I'm so grateful for how it supported me. But I think for you, I think that's really powerful too, of the not the all or nothing mentality when it comes to alcohol, but seeing that it does affect like your anxiety. So if you
Oh,
want to touch a bit more on that, I'd love to hear more
oh,
about
yeah.
your relationship with alcohol.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And I'm glad we're bringing this up too, because I think this is something that a lot of people with perfectionism and anxiety and burnout use to cope. And I'm one of them, right? Like, I think at the beginning, I was telling you, I've been through like a couple years of burnout and I don't think I saw it fully. And I think I'm still like getting out of it now. But I remember there being a time where I was wanting a glass of wine every time I got home from work. And because it's so normalized, like even me as a therapist, but I was still having that thought. And I remember that was a sign that like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like I can have alcohol when I'm celebrating, but what's going on for me that I'm turning to this? And that's the approach I like to take with anybody, right? Like, what is leading you to even want to drink? What is your purpose behind it? Are you being intentional when you drink? And I do believe that some of us, it's all or nothing. And that's how it has to be. And I hate it for some people. And I know it's hard. And if your body is allergic to it, which essentially is what addiction is, you're never going to be able to have it and still feel like you can trust yourself, right? And addiction makes us not trust ourselves because it takes us out of that grounded whole self when we turn to something that we know is inherently bad. So like the all or nothing for me is being intentional and using my values to dictate my decisions. I do so much value work with my clients. And one of the first things I do with new clients is like help them determine what those are so that those can guide their decisions and not anxiety, right? Because if we lean on anxiety and these unhealed parts of us, we're all going to want to drink. Like it sounds like you felt social anxiety and you're like, okay, what is that telling me to do? It's telling me to like get rid of it. And how can I get rid of it? I can drink and feel better, right? So like if you can make a decision based on my values, like one of my values is my dogs. It took me a lot of work to accept that. They're one of my top values. I have been on an infertility journey for like 5 years. So I've like accepted that, okay, these are my babies. And I make so many decisions based off of them. And it's okay if people don't understand that. So sometimes like with drinking, it's like if I drink too much tonight, if I go out and have a glass of wine, am I going to want to wake up in the morning and take my dogs for a walk? Does that make sense? Like, does
That makes total sense. I love that.
Yeah. Like you can have a relationship with alcohol, but what is it based on? Is it based on you wanting to self-soothe, or is it based on me wanting to celebrate with my husband an anniversary or something?
Yes. Yeah. First, too, I want to acknowledge I'm so sorry about your infertility, that you're struggling with that. I feel like so many women can relate with that. Like,
yes, absolutely.
And I'm so sorry about that. And I want to have a more conversation around that like later on, not in this episode, but I feel like there's so much to unpack with that. And you're not alone in that. I just really want to
thank you for
that.
saying that. Yeah.
But I think too, it's like so many of us use alcohol as a coping mechanism. So when you do start to question it, starting to learn healthier coping mechanisms. And like a lot of things started to come up for me after I cut alcohol out, because I started to have to deal with what was coming up instead of pushing it away. But it's powerful because then you come home more to yourself. You have a deeper understanding of yourself. So it's so powerful to be able to use alcohol like in a celebratory way, find balance with it, balance with everything. But I think understanding when you're leaning on it as a coping mechanism, what your values are and all of that. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. If it takes you away from what's really important to you, that's when I think it's time to explore the relationship with it. And there's so many sober, curious people out there these days, and I freaking love it. I'm all here for the books on it. And like, I have so many clients bring it up just naturally in session. And I just think it's time, right? It's time for our society to stop with the normalizing of it and stop with making it this thing. And every TV show we watch and every movie we see, it's like the mommy wine culture or the daddy, like, let me go drink 5 beers with my friends in the garage on a Saturday. Like, I think we just are having to reevaluate what it actually does and how we can use it in our lives.
I agree. Yeah. Because it's very detrimental and it's become so normalized and acceptable. And it's really so detrimental. And we just act like it's the most normalized drug out there,
It is. It's like the only one that people don't question you on. Well, it's only one that people question you on if you say you're not doing it. Yes. I don't know if you've noticed that, right? But people would never ask you, oh, why don't you like take cocaine or something or do cocaine? Like, but they will ask you like, Holly, why don't you drink?
Yes.
As if like, you need a reason not to. You don't need a reason. Maybe you just don't want to, and that's reason enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And something I work with my clients on too is creating boundaries with alcohol, because that really does affect your health. And when people ask you, why aren't you drinking? Having a response, being like, oh, I don't feel like drinking tonight. And
Absolutely.
that's okay. That's
Or
enough.
you can say whatever.
Yeah.
It's good that you practice that with them. Like it's good to practice that. Like it's not going to be perfect when you set those boundaries with anything.
Yes.
So
Yes.
practice different things coming up, right? Different types of people asking questions.
Yeah. And I know we're coming up on time, but I'm curious too, with boundaries, I just want to get your perspective on how people can start to set healthy boundaries within their relationships. I feel like that's a really powerful one. So,
Such a big question. And also, yeah, so needed. The first thing I always do when I start talking about boundaries with a client is help them get super clear about their values. Again, like, what are your lack of boundaries? Like, how are those compromising your values? Like, how do we learn how to set boundaries around things if we don't actually know what's important to us? So I think that's the first part. And that takes some time, right? Like, if we don't really know ourselves, if we've been this perfected imposter version of ourselves for so long, sometimes it's hard to even know, okay, well, what's important to me?
yeah.
Right? Like, what are my values? Like, how do I actually want to live my life? And then the next part is learning the areas in which we need to set them. Right. So like, I think actually setting boundaries, there's a few things that come before it. Like I said, it's like the values, and then it's learning like, what are the areas in my life that are suffering because of boundaries or not having boundaries. And then the next part is like really then exposing ourselves to the discomfort of them, right? Like learning that they're going to be messy and people are going to push past them. You can't set a boundary once and expect, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to listen to me. I never have to do that again.
Yeah.
So I just think I do a lot of like realistic exploration around them. Like, here are what they are. Here's like what they can look like. And how do we ensure that we have realistic expectations about how those are going to impact us? In like the practice that I used to work at, we have actually a line in our consent form and paperwork that says, I don't remember the words, but I would always bring it up. It said like, your relationships might start to suffer or struggle once you start to get better. And once you start to do therapy, things are going to change. People aren't going to like you setting boundaries, Holly. Like, they're not going to want that to happen. And so I think also educating clients on that and letting them know, if this feels messy and if this feels harder before it gets easier, you're probably doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I feel like that was such a broad answer, but like,
no, I love that. No,
okay, it's such a big question. Truly, like, boundaries are huge.
Yeah, boundaries are huge too. That's why I wanted to touch on it too, because I feel like so many people feel like they need to set boundaries, but don't know how to. And I know like it's easy to set it once and then it's crossed. And then how do you
exactly? They're like, oh, never mind.
Yeah. It's like really standing strong to your boundaries, and the people that respect you will respect your boundaries.
Exactly.
Like it says a lot about a person that is continually crossing your boundaries, and how do you need to reset that with them or create space within that relationship. Because people don't like when you start sticking up for yourself and prioritizing yourself, because it's inconvenient for them. But ultimately,
you're the only one who can show up for yourself. Like, nobody else is going to come along in your life and say, like, I got your back, like you can. Yeah. It just doesn't happen. And with boundaries, so much of the time, we just expect that people can read our mind, right? It's common sense. Don't do this to me kind of thing. Like, and so a lot of times I have to ask people like, okay, well, did you say that? Did you set that boundary? Do they know that that's what you want? And so the people pleasing, of course, comes into that, because we're all like, oh, I don't want to disappoint somebody. I don't want to set that boundary. What if they don't like me? Like, I then ask like, well, what if they do respect it? Right? What's the other side of the what if? Like, what if you set this boundary at work and you start to feel better and you start to realize that you can do more and your relationships start to get better and you have more energy? So like, so much of setting a boundary is realizing that people can't read our mind, and we deserve it and they deserve it for us to be able to say that and name what it is that we want and need. Yeah,
definitely. And I feel so many of us aren't taught how to communicate. So being able to communicate our boundaries can be really hard. So it's coming into your heart space of why you're doing this in the first place, and really moving through that uncomfortability and stating what your boundary is to that person. Because again, no one can read your mind. So you're going to have to communicate it, and that's going to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
It's for your growth to stick up for yourself too. Yeah.
So, there are so many good books on boundaries. Like, I think one of them is by Nidra Tawwab. I like probably messed up her name, but it's so good. And it's such a good starter pack for people if they want to get into it. But I would also say to anybody wanting to start setting boundaries, it's like a long haul. And it's okay that it takes you a while to figure out what that is and how to set them and how to be okay setting them. I still struggle with it. And I feel like I've been practicing for like 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a daily choice too, you know, like continually showing up for yourself and sticking to your boundaries. It's a daily
and saying no when you want to say no instead of saying yes and then being super freaking resentful.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Like knowing that it's safe for you to say no when you mean no. And like you're still worthy of love even when you put yourself first. It's safe for you to put yourself first, your needs first.
And it's actually compassionate. Right? Yeah. Like Brene Brown, you probably know her, but she always says, and I brought this quote up so many times, like the most compassionate people are the most boundaried people, right? It's like
taking care of themselves.
Yes. And like, if I can take care of me, I take such better care of my husband. I take such better care of my friends. I take such better care of my client.
Yes.
That is the most compassionate thing I can do for me, but also for everybody else, right? It's actually a very nice thing to do for other people.
Yeah. I honestly say it's the most selfless thing that you can do because like when you are full, when you set your boundaries, you're able to take care of yourself and come from a grounded, calm, compassionate place rather than running on empty and like spewing your resentment over everybody. It's like
because you didn't tell them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it is. I love that. I feel like that perspective really needs to start shifting so people really start saying no when they mean no and prioritizing themselves and taking care of themselves. Because when you take care of yourself and you love yourself, you can take care of others and love others in such a deep way, you know, and that's what we need, you know?
It's so true. Yeah. I think people are picking up on it. I think the patterns I see, you know, like I see all the same things coming up in my clients and it says like all of it, right? The boundaries, the perfectionism, the self-compassion, like the body work, all of this. And it's just so magical to hear you talking about it while you're not a therapist. Like the work that you do is so essential to healing in our community. I'm a firm believer in like the whole picture. So collaborating with my clients, like massage therapists or their doctors or their nutritionists or their dietitians, like helping them find these other practices because therapy once a week is not enough. It will never be enough, right? The work happens in between, like from like people like you kind of sharing that wisdom, like here's what you can do with some of the stuff that you talk about in therapy. It's so much more than just talking about things. And I think you speak to that just by the work you do.
Oh, thank you. Yes. And all of us are so needed. I feel like all of us play a different puzzle piece. You know, we're all just trying to piece things together. Everyone's needed, playing their own unique roles. And like we resonate with different people. And yeah, it's all so needed. And it's also, I think all of this work is being talked about now more than ever. So shifts are really starting to happen, which I'm so excited to see. But
me too.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to say, like when you were talking about that book,
I didn't start with you. Yeah.
I just read this book called Emotional Inheritance by this psychologist. I definitely recommend that, Holly. Like if you found so much from that book, this book moved me in ways like I haven't been moved in so long. And it spoke a lot to that mother wound, right? Like
I have chills as you're talking about.
Yes. It makes me so happy to know that this generation of us, we're stopping so much of that stuff from going down the line. And like whether we have kids or not, like the impacts, like I just can't wait to see what our children, like our age group, what these children are like one day, because I just think we are doing the work. So many of us are willing to heal all these generations. And it just makes me excited for the generations to come, you know, truly.
Yeah. I am too. I do feel so many of us are stopping the cycle and it takes one person stopping it. So I feel like it's going to be a very different world coming up here. So I really feel, yeah, it's beautiful. I'm going to check out that book. I had full body chills as you were talking. So
I read it in like 12 hours. I actually like went on, like I put in my notice of my last job and I went on like a trip and I tried to stay off my phone. So I was like, I'm just going to read this book. Oh my gosh. I was like, we were in the car and I let out this whole like, like it wasn't like, I don't know what it was. And Ernie was like, are you okay? I was like, it's just so beautiful. I don't know how to say anything else. Another thing I see when people can realize that is they have compassion for their parents. I don't know if that happened for you.
I have so much love and compassion for my parents. And I think that's where we need a lot of people to be able to see it from that lens, because there's so much resentment and I get it. But that's where your self-work has to come in. So then you can have compassion for yourself, have compassion for others.
And then it changes, right?
Yeah.
It's the ripple effect.
Right.
I
Yes.
swear, like I see it happen in so many clients that'll come to therapy. Their goal for therapy is to not necessarily change the relationship with their parents. However, once we start to do the work and once we start to realize that nothing is black and white and like nothing that happened to you as a kid from the hands of your parents or other people was about you.
Right.
Once you can see that, you can start to see, okay, then like maybe my parents weren't doing this to me because I'm a bad child. Like maybe my parents weren't doing this to me because I was too dramatic, or maybe that wasn't the case. And over time, I just see it happen naturally. These adult clients have compassion for their parents.
Yeah.
And they start to say in session, like, oh, like, I didn't realize me and my mom now talk about this stuff all the time. And like a mom who had never been to therapy, right? Like the baby boomers and like the generation after them. But like slowly, even if they don't go to therapy, I think like we can model that in our families, right? Like you've modeled that, I'm sure, in yours. A lot of people in my big family, my dad's in the military. He's never been to therapy, but I kid you not, there's a ripple effect.
I love that so much. I love that you're seeing even in your clients start to really be able to see their parents from a compassionate lens, because that's so healing.
It is
so healing, like
for everybody.
Yeah, for everyone involved. Yeah, it's just, and that's what I feel like we really need more of as well. And that'll continue to shift and unfold how it's supposed to. But it's really like our parents, I truly believe, that did the best they could with what they had. And when you can really see that and validate your own pain and your own experience, but see them as well, it's like
at the same time. Yeah. Like you don't have to forgive them. Like I think in some cases, like I have clients who like aren't able to do that for many reasons. And at the same time, like, how can you understand that that had nothing to do with you? And make space for the fact that it can still be really painful. And like you can still be struggling with it, even if you know it had nothing to do with you, even if you know that your parents could have done a better job. I think it's just such a spectrum of that, right? Like I don't believe that we have to forgive to move on. But I do think that can be a part of somebody's journey. And sometimes it's just recognizing that like you might not ever be able to, but how do you still heal from that? Without forgiveness or without an apology ever.
Yeah. It's like, even if you never receive that apology, how can you validate that experience for yourself and come to terms with you may never receive that apology?
It's the grief, right? Like the grief of it not ever being the way you want. And that's so hard.
Yeah.
For everything, right? I think we all grieve versions of our life that never were. And we all grieve like versions of our life that like will never be. I think that comes up with everything. It's really interesting, but like, I don't know, like maybe you grieve that you didn't get to experience life or college without alcohol. Like, I know you said you have like gratitude for it. I think it's also okay to say like, I grieve, like for me, like I grieve that I wasn't able to experience grad school without shame and stuff, right? Or like I wasn't able to experience grad school the way I wanted to because my mom was sick, right? Like I think if we can grieve what isn't or what never was, we really make space to accept like what is and what can be.
Yes. I love that. I totally agree with you. Yes. Well, I'll put your social media links in the show notes so people can go follow Shana. She's beautiful. And yes, are you taking on clients right now too?
I'm not, but like will be soon, like probably at the end of the summer. And I'm licensed in North Carolina. So anybody in North Carolina, I can do telehealth or in person.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yay. So I'll have all of that in her socials in the show notes. But thank you so much for your time. I loved chatting with you. I love your perspective. I feel like people are going to get so much out of this episode, just like with the vulnerability, authenticity, realness of it too, and just all the tools that you shared. So thank you so much. But yeah, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much, Holly. It was so great chatting with you. And I am excited for the next time we do this.
Yes, thank you.